Hey, what's up everyone? I'm out here today on a small mountain stream. It's about 2 weeks before the Pennsylvania State opening day for trout season. So water's kind of limited. You can't fish stock streams right now. And there's only a couple special regulation areas close by. So I came up into the mountains today. There was another vehicle in the parking lot that I think is a fisherman. So I'm not sure which way he went. I have a hunch that he's above me, but I can't say for sure. So I traditionally like to fish my way upstream when I'm fishing small streams like this. But since I think he's above me, I'm gonna work my way down today. And if I don't have any luck, then I'm going to assume he fished that already and I'm gonna work my way upstream instead. So we're just gonna see, kind of play it by ear here, see what happens. And I'll talk you through what I like to do when I'm fishing small streams. So kind of the first thing to talk about here is use your gear. So any fly rod will work for this. This is actually a pretty large mountain stream. Some of these streams get tiny that have wild brook trout in them. So I would suggest going with something a little shorter. I typically fish with a 10-foot 3-weight. And I probably could have got away with that here today in this creek, but instead I grabbed my my 8.5-foot 5-weight. It's just the other rod that I have, my backup rod. And I figured, in case I want to end up in some smaller streams today, I don't have to worry about banging my nicer rod up against tree limbs and stuff and maybe busting it. So I'll talk you through what I like to do here as I work through the stream. So one thing when it comes to fishing for these brook trout, I can talk about is fly selection. So in my experience, there's not a lot of food in these mountain streams, and these brook trout are just eager to eat. So I don't think fly selection is super important. I like to fish a dry dropper. I don't know if you can see here, but I got a small caddis as my dry fly. The reason I use a caddis is, one, fish eat them, and two, they float pretty well with deer hair body, and they're pretty easy to see. And my bottom fly here, the dropper, is just a Frenchie nymph. I think any nymph will work fairly well. I like to just go with something that has a little bit of color, because these fish don't seem to be too picky. If you put it in front of them without spooking them, they tend to eat it. The one thing you really want to watch for when you're going to fish these small streams is you need to be stealthy. So don't wear any bright colors. I think, like I said, if you get a fly in the water before spooking the fish, and there's fish there, they're gonna eat it. I've never fished this before, so I have no idea if there's a lot of natives in here. I'm sure there are some, but if there's a lot of fish and you can get your fly in the water without spooking them, you're gonna catch them. So be stealthy, keep your shadow off the water, try not to be seen by the fish. Just caught a leaf there. And again, I prefer to fish my way upstream. I think it's easier. If you're fishing your way downstream, I think you tend to spook some more fish. But like I said, I'm not sure where that guy is, so I'm gonna fish like this for a while, just see what happens. Hopefully I can catch something. Well, as soon as I turned the camera off there, I hooked onto this little brookie. So that's the first trip. That's a good sign. You gotta borrow this hook here, so I'm just gonna flip them off. I'll get my hand wet here first. Always keep your hand wet when you're handling these guys. And just get him back into the water. Oh, he's squirming around. It's a beautiful little brookie. Awesome big orange fin on the bottom there. Get him back in. Hopefully we'll get a bunch of them today. So the next thing I kind of want to talk you guys through is the gear I bring with me. So when I'm fishing on a bigger stream, bigger creek or river, I normally have a vest packed full of stuff. And you can haul that in here with you if you want when you're fishing these smaller streams, but I find it's just not really necessary. And I'll tell you why. So one, I don't really change flies much. I feel if they're not eating, it's because I'm spooking them. It's not my fly selection. I just have a little sling bag on and everyone took the dry fly. Got the caddis. So that's a pretty little brookie right there. So that's why I love using that caddis. It's easy to see, it acts as an indicator, and the fish just always seem to love it. So again, I have a little sling bag on, and instead of hauling all kinds of tippet and all kinds of fly boxes and whatever else you normally have with you, I just throw in my sling bag a fly box of dry flies, a fly box of nymphs. If you want, you can fish, you know, little woolly buggers, little streamers for these brookies will work great too. But I tend to stick with nymphs and dry flies. So I have those. And the nice thing, I'm not wearing waders or anything, I'm just wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants. And I like having the pockets available to me. So in my pocket, I have dry fly dressing and dry fly floating powder. So one of the biggest things is keeping your dry fly floating. So deer hair helps the fly float, but after a while it'll still lose some of that. Once it gets soaked, it'll lose some of that floatability. And depending on how big the stream is you're fishing, there may not be enough room to make some false casts to dry that out. So I like to keep that readily available. And as soon as my fly loses its ability to float, I just grab some of that powder, dip it in, and maybe reapply some of the gink floating if I have to. And you're back in business. So I keep those readily available in my pocket, and everything else I just have in my backpack here, because you don't really need it right away. But it's there if you have it. The other things I like to bring with, I bring 1 extra leader. You can bring a couple. You shouldn't really lose much here. If you get in a tree, you can typically get it out when you're fishing these small streams. Every now and then something might happen that your leader needs replaced. So I bring a second one just in case, but I haven't had to use that yet, so, but I always have it there. And then I just bring a spool of tippet. So you might lose your tippet a little bit. If you end up in a tree, you can't get it loose, you break off some tippet. Or if you're switching flies, which I don't do often, but if you're switching flies, you have that extra tippet to kind of add that dropper back on, or add on to your leader if you need to. So it works well. So that's all I really bring with me, guys. That's all you need. I like to minimize it, because carrying a big vest around through some of this laurel and stuff is just, it's too hard to keep track of, and it catches on everything, and it gets in your way, and you don't really need that much in it. All right. So I actually went back to my truck, put my waders on, and I'm gonna fish upstream. I don't know if this guy's upstream or not. I'll fish for a while. If I don't have any luck, I'll just quit and assume he fished it. The downstream approach it just isn't good. It's not good enough. It doesn't work as well. Upstream approach is the way to go. So that's how I'm gonna fish the rest of the way. So one thing, guys, when the water's cold like this, the fish aren't as active. If you're fishing a stream with native brook trout and you're fishing it in the late spring, early summer, these fish are going to be attacking you flies. I mean, if there's brook trout in there, it's like a race. They're in an arms race to get there first. When the water's colder, they're not as active. They might not be looking up. So you might actually be better off. There's one. Real little fella. Oh, he fell off. You might actually have better luck fishing a small streamer maybe. But that's just not the way I like to fish. I like to fish this way. And I'll pick a few up along the way. That's good enough for me. I think right now in the colder water, these fish are kind of hanging out in the right on the side and the edge of the currents. So there's some deeper pools with some fast currents in them, which might hold fish in warmer weather. But right now I think the fish are kind of focused somewhere where they don't have to spend as much energy just fighting the current. Right there's one right there on that side eddy. Get my hand wet to handle this little guy. And they are just as pretty as can be. Everyone splashed at the dry fly a couple times. I noticed that I fished last week in another small stream, and I noticed the fish were coming up and eyeing up the dry fly but not striking it. I think that just has to do with the cold water. If it was a little warmer, those fish will come up and hammer that fly. You might not catch them, but they'll bite. Here one took the dropper. So I've just found that I'm more willing to take the dropper right now. They're maybe not looking up as much in these colder months. There's another little guy, very pretty. Get him back in there. Now we'll move up to the next pool. All right guys, I want to talk a little bit more about fly selection here. So earlier I mentioned I'm fishing a caddis dry fly and a Frenchie. So, like I said, I don't think fly selection is super important. I think these fish are gonna eat if you get it there without spooking them. But I will say two things come to mind, a couple things come to mind when selecting a fly to use for these small streams. So one, I want a dry fly that floats well. If you're fishing a dry fly that doesn't have a lot of hackle or doesn't have deer hair and it just can't stand the current, it's not going to be effective. You want to be able to see that fly, either because fish are going to be taking it, or it's kind of your bobber, if you will, your indicator for your nymph. So when selecting it, I like something small enough that the fish can eat it without any trouble, but big enough that it can be easily visible and support your nymph. So by that I mean your fly has to be buoyant enough, big enough, because when you attach a nymph to the bottom of it, that nymph's going to be trying to pull it down. So I try to keep my nymphs small so they're not too heavy for my dropper, and you need them to be lightweight enough that they're not going to pull your dropper down, but they need to be heavy enough that they can sink in a short amount of time. Some of these pools and currents are just real short, and you don't have much time to get that fly down before your dry fly rips it right out of the seam, right out of the pocket. So I tie, like I said, a Frenchie. It's on a jig hook with slotted tungsten bead, and it's a real slim fly. So the slimmer the profile, the quicker it sinks, just because there's less resistance there. So those are kind of the rules of thumb I follow when selecting a fly to use. That's a little fella. All right guys, so I did actually run into those other fishermen. They were upstream like I thought they were. So I bounced down here a pretty good ways from my truck. I'm just gonna fish my way back up until I get to my truck, and then I'm gonna call it quits. I've never seen this part of the creek before. I don't know if it has good holding water, if it has a lot of fish, no idea. This will be a nice little exploration trip here. Hopefully we can get a couple fish in hand. There we go. Quick release. Ooh, there's a nice one. Oh, that was a much nicer fish on the dropper. There's a little guy. There's a nice fish. That's gorgeous right there. Now we got into him here a little bit. Get him off of there. Barbless hook will pop right out, hopefully. There, he took the dry. I just can't keep him on that. Definitely the most active pool I found today though. That's about 5 or 6 fish that are willing to take a bite here. Just not able to land many of them today. There's a good one on the caddis. There, we got him on the dry. Man, their fins are just so gorgeous. Alright guys, so I just caught a fish on the dry. Had a couple other hits on it, and had some take it, the dropper, which pulled the dry underwater. It's not floating the best right now. So what I'm gonna do, I got my dry fly desiccant here. I'm just gonna put that in there. Close the lid on that, give it a little shake. And that powder works wonders. It just soaks the water right out of there, and it will have no trouble floating now. Oh, there's another dry taker right there. There's nothing better than watching a little fish go up and just grab a juicy dry fly. There he is on the dry fly. Another dry fly taker. That one is pretty. That one's got some, oh, and he got off. That one had some great par marks. Really pretty fish. There's one on the dropper. That's a pretty fish right there. Guess they all are, but you never get tired of seeing them. That is a really pretty fish. This looks like a promising spot. Maybe pick up a fish or two. There's one already. Took the dropper. Just a little fella. There he fell off. There's another one on the dropper. I saw another fish swimming there with it. I picked two up anyway. That's good. The way today's going, that's a pretty good hole. I don't think anything's going to compare to that last stretch, but fish here and there is good. Oh, that's a nice fish. That's a nice one. That's a totally different color than most of the fish we've been catching today. Much lighter color. Ah, guess not. It's one of the bigger ones we've had today, though. Another caddis eater. Now he's tangled up in there. We'll get him out. This happens sometimes when you're fishing two flies. Line will get tangled around them. Not really sure what's happening here. But for this fish's health, I'm going to cut my line. There, we got him. There he is. I think he'll be alright. Oh, now I got her tie on, so good thing I brought that extra tippet. Alright, I got my flies restrung up here. Had to add some tippet to my dry fly and tied a dropper on. I went with a pink Frenchie this time instead of blue. I always preferred to fish pink. I had blue on to start the day. I want to see if it makes any kind of difference. Kind of doubt it will. But I also have one new thing to add to your list of things to bring with you. So I totally wasn't prepared. I wasn't even going to wear my waders today. Well, I went back for them and my bootlace ripped. So my shoe is very, very loose right now. I do carry a pair of extra laces in my vest, but I didn't even think to grab them. So like I said, I wasn't planning to wear the waders at all. I ended up going back for them. So from now on, I'm probably going to carry an extra pair of laces with me. That was a good take on the dropper, on the pink Frenchie. Ooh, that was a little bit better of a fish, maybe. Yeah, that's a good one. I like the pink Frenchie. No dry fly takes in this pool yet, but gotta be a fish in there. There he is. It's a nice fish on the dropper. Nice fish. Put him back in his home. Well guys, that's it for today's video. So it was a pretty successful trip. I think a little warmer weather, and I think I would have got some more fish to the hand. But all in all, they were pretty active. We had a couple of good holes there that the fish just really kind of turned on, I think, when the sun warmed the water up just a hair in those longer, slower pools. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're interested in learning to tie some flies, check out our beginner fly tying series. And if you want to see some more fishing, just check out our fly fishing for trout series, and stay tuned. We're going to be posting some more videos here this spring. Hopefully we get into some good fishing for you guys. Take care.